Hello guys, today we will talking about the last part of the female genital system. The last lecture we talked about the ovary and the fallopian tube. Let's continue with the uterus. Uterus is the pear-shaped muscular organ formed from three parts: fundus, body, and the cervix. The fundus and the body have the same structure, which is the mucosa, musculosa, and serosa, or adventitia. Mucosa is the layer just after the lumen, which is called endometrium. The muscle layer is called myometrium, while the fundus presented inside the peritoneum, so the connective tissue lining is called the serosa, while the body is called the adventitia. Both of them is called the perimetrium. Okay, the cervix has a different structure. Its mucosa, it contains epithelium and the lamina propria. The epithelium is a simple columnar mucus secreting, but at the vaginal surface it is a stratified squamous non-keratinized. The lamina propria of the cervix contains a cervical mucus secreting gland. The mucosa of the cervix has no coiled arteries, and there are no cyclic hormonal changes. Cyclic hormonal changes occurs only in the uterus, in the endometrium of the uterus. The endometrium formed from epithelium and the lamina propria, as the endometrium is the mucosa of the fundus and the body. The epithelium is a simple columnar, partially ciliated and partially mucus secreting. The lamina propria containing a connective tissue with uterine glands, stromal cells called diucidal cells, and arteries nourishing the endometrium from which the cyclic changes occurs. The muscle layer called the myometrium, which is a thick layer of smooth muscle fibers enclosing a large blood vessel in between. The layers of the endometrium has two layers: functional layer called stratum functional and the basal layer called stratum basal. The functional layer is a superficial layer, thick layer affected by a cyclic hormonal changes and shed off during the menstruation because it's supplied by a spiral coiled arteries, while the basal layer presented deeply with a which is thinner than the functional layer, not affected by a cyclic hormonal changes, so is preserved during menstruation as it is a permanent layer. Blood supply of this layer with straight arteries. This is the layers of the endometrium. What about the layers of the myometrium? Myometrium contains three layers: stratum subvascular or stratum submucosum, stratum vascular, and stratum supravascular. Subvascular is thin. Vascular is the thickest layer. Supravascular is also thin. The arrangement of the muscles in the subvascular is longitudinal, while in the vascular it's a circular and oblique, arranged spirally around the blood vessels in H-shaped manner, while the stratum supravascular arranged longitudinally. This is a section of the uterus. This is the endometrium, contain endometrial glands, and this is the three layers of the myometrium, which formed from stratum subvascular, longitudinal and thin, stratum vascular, inner and oblique, arranged in an 8 manner, which is a thick, and stratum supravascular, which is outer and thin. Then this is the layer of serosa or adventitia, which is called the perimetrium. This is the uterus, this is the endometrium, then myometrium, then the perimetrium, which is a serosa or adventitia. What is the cyclic endometrial changes or menstrual changes or menstrual cycle, which lasts for 28 days? These changes occurs due to hormones from the ovary, which is the estrogen and progesterone, and hormones from the pituitary gland, which is FSH and LH hormones. This cycle starts at the puberty and stops at menopause. The phases of this cycle, 3 phases: menstrual phase, follicular or proliferative phase, and secretory or luteal phase. What is the difference? The control of menstrual phase by a rapid drop of estrogen and progesterone due to degeneration of the corpus luteum, which starts 14 days after ovulation for a 3 to 5 days duration, while follicular, controlled by FSH and estrogen from the developing follicles, starts after stoppage of menstrual flow and for 12 to 14 days duration, while secretory or luteal, controlled under LH and progesterone secreted from corpus luteum, starts after ovulation and lasts for 14 days in duration. The changes that occur in the menstrual phase: if the fertilization doesn't occur, there is an ischemia and necrosis occurs of the endometrium due to vasoconstriction of the coiled arteries, then sudden dilatation lead to gush of blood and shedding of the functional endometrium. Then the follicular phases: the epithelium is restored, the stroma is renewed, and the coiled arteries extended to supply the newly formed functional zone. Then the secretory or luteal phase: the endometrium is sagged, edematous, coiled arteries are more large and more coiled. This changes is called the decussal reaction to prepare the endometrium for a reception of the fertilized ovum. So this is the menstruation cycle, follicular phase, ovulation, and luteal phase. Follicular phase, ovulation, luteal phase. This menstrual phase, where there is a shedding in the endometrium, and in the follicular phase there is a restoration in the structure of the endometrium, while secretory or luteal phase there is a thickening and edematous changes occurs in the endometrial layer to be prepared for the fertilized ova. As you see in that, there is a blood in these shedding parts, and this is an restoration, and this is an edematous part. This is the uterus. The part of the female genital system after the uterus is called vagina. Vagina is a hollow organ formed from mucosa, musculosa, and adventitia as it away from the peritoneum. Mucosa formed as usual from epithelium and lamina propria. Epithelium of the vagina is stratified, squamous, non-keratinized, rich in glycogen as it's an opening into the skin. As we said that the skin lined by stratified, squamous, keratinized. Any opening on the skin is lined with the same epithelium, but it is non-keratinized as the vagina. But this epithelium contains glycogen. We know the function of this glycogen later on. The lamina propria contains connective tissue, blood vessels, elastic fibers with no glands. But how the vagina is lubricated? Vagina is lubricated from the cervical mucus glands, as the vagina itself has no glands. Okay. What about musculosa? Musculosa is arranged as inner circular and outer longitudinal layers, but the external orifice is surrounded by skeletal muscle fibers, as any opening in the skin. Then adventitia. So vagina is lined by a mucosa, epithelium and lamina propria, then musculosa, then adventitia. What is the structural function adaptation of the vaginal mucosa? Means how the structure of the vagina is adapted to do its own function. First, the epithelium, as we said, it's rich in glycogen. This glycogen used for nutrition of the sperm, and it's fermented to a lactic acid, which decrease the pH and make an acidic environment to prevent the bacterial invasion. Although the vaginal mucosa contains a sensory nerve ending, as this part is a very sensitive area. Third, the capillary in the lamina propria provide a fluid lubricants. Besides, the secretion comes from the cervical mucus glands, as the vagina has no glands. This is the structure of the vagina. Contain epithelium, stratified, squamous, non-keratinized, with lamina propria contain many blood vessels for lubrication, and the musculosa inner circular and the outer longitudinal, and lastly there is adventitia. This is the vagina, stratified squamous epithelium, then blood vessels in the lamina propria. This layer is called the mucosal layer. Then this is a muscular layer, inner circular and outer longitudinal. After the vagina, there is the external genitalia, which is the vulva, formed from clitoris, labia minora, labia majora, and mons pubis. Okay, let's talk about a transient structure present in the female genital system called the placenta. Called transient because it appears only in pregnancy and it's disappeared. This transient structure that called the placenta formed from two parts, fetal part and maternal part. The fetal part is called chorionic villi that attached from the fetus, and the maternal part is formed from two parts, blood spaces which are irregular surrounding the chorionic villi, and Diosida bizalis, which is enlarged stromal cells, which is a spindle in shape. Why? What is the placenta? From the first, placenta is an organ, act as a lung and a pathway connect the mother and her fetus for the baby nourishment. Okay, the chorionic villi, it's a finger-like projections, hence it's called villi, like that of the intestine, embedded in the endometrium. They branch and anastomose and separated from each other by intervillous spaces containing maternal blood. Each villus is formed from a connective tissue core containing fetal blood vessels. They covered with two layers of cells called trophoblasts. These two layers of trophoblasts may be cytotrophoblast called Langer's layer or syncytial trophoblast. This cryotrophoblast is the inner layer resting on a basement membrane formed from cubical cells and rapidly dividing cells. This layer rich in ribosomes and glycogen and lacks lipids. While syncytial trophoblast, it is the outer layer formed from cells with no cell boundaries that shows microvilli and contain mitochondria, rough endoplasmic reticulum, and multiple Golgi apparatus with lipid droplets. So syncytial trophoblast is outer and contain more lipids. Cytotrophoblast is inner and lacks lipids. This layer, cytotrophoblast, it disappears after the 4th month of pregnancy, so the villi after 4th month covered only with syncytial trophoblast. This is the syncytial trophoblast with the outer layer, and this is the cytotrophoblast which is the inner layer. This is the cytotrophoblast, which is the inner layer, and this is the syncytial trophoblast with the outer layer, and this is the blood vessels in between. This is a fetal blood, and this is a maternal blood. This is an early month. After 4th month, the inner layer disappeared and became only syncytial trophoblast. This is the placenta presented with a syncytial trophoblast, and this is the fetal blood. Okay, this placenta presented, or this section taken after 4th month. Why? Because there is only syncytial trophoblast, which is the outer layer, and the inner layer not existed. This is also a placenta, contains two layers. This is before. Why before? Because it contains the two layers, cytoplasmoblast and the syncytial trophoblast. So what is the function of the placenta? Placenta responsible for nutrition, respiration, and the excretion of waste products of the fetus. Although it is an endocrine organ that secrete human chorionic gonadotropin by syncytial trophoblast to maintain the corpus luteum. The human chorionic somatomamotropin by syncytial trophoblast also progesterone and estrogen, also prolactin, also a hormone called the placental lactogen. All of this is a hormone secreted temporarily by the placenta. Human chorionic gonadotropins, somatomamotropins, progestin, estrogen, prolactin, placental lactogen. What is the placental barrier? Placental barrier, it's a barrier between maternal and fetal blood, formed from 6 components: endothelial lining of the fetal blood vessel, the basement membrane around this endothelium, a connective tissue core of the vellus with phagocytic cells called Hofbauer cells, basement membrane of the trophoblast, which is cytotrophoblast and syncytotrophoblast. All of this forms the barrier between the maternal and fetal blood called placental barrier. What is the function of this barrier? Is a selective for nutrients and oxygen, although it prevents harmful substances from passage to the fetus and prevent immunological reaction that may kill the fetus inside the mother's uterus. This is the placental barrier formed from trophoblast, syncytotrophoblast and the cytotrophoblast with their basement membrane, and there is a connective tissue. Again, this is a cytotrophoblast and syncytotrophoblast surrounding chorionic villi and embryonic blood vessels with the basement membrane. This is the placental barrier formed from intravellus space, syncytotrophoblast, cytotrophoblast, vellus stroma, and fetal capillary endothelium. Okay, let's talk about the last part of these accessory organs in the female reproductive system, which is the mammary gland. Mammary gland presented in female breast, but it differs in the structure according to the state of this female. It is resting gland or gland acting in case of pregnancy or lactating gland. The capsule of resting gland is covered by skin from outside. Generally, the mammary gland or the breast is a solid organ, so it's formed from a stroma and parenchyma as usual. The capsule or this stroma formed from capsule, septa, and adipose connective tissue, not reticular connective tissue as usual, as the breast is a fatty organ, so there is no reticular connective tissue but presented adipose connective tissue. The capsule is the skin covered the breast from outside. The septa, which may be interlobular or interlobular, interlobar septa, which is a sac from the dermis called Cooper's ligaments, dividing the gland into 15 to 25 loops. Then interlobular septa divides the loops into lobules. Around this septa there is an adipose connective tissue. This is the structure of the stroma in the mammary gland in case of resting stage or pregnant stage or lactating stage as general. Okay, the parenchyma. Parenchyma containing from secretory alveoli and the duct system. Secretory alveoli not presented in the resting case but presented in the pregnant case, in late pregnant case actually, and in lactating case. Duct system is the same in resting pregnant, and lactating, which means that resting gland contain duct system only, while pregnant and lactating contain both secretory alveoli and duct system. The duct system is intralobular, which lined by a cubical epithelium and allied with myoepithelium, interlobular, which lined by a cubical epithelium, lactiferous duct lined by a stratified columnar, lactiferous acinus, which is a dilated terminal end of the lactiferous duct that lied by stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, this is the resting mammary gland, which contain only duct. There is no secreting alveoli. This is the capsule, which is the skin, and this is the ligament, which is the Cooper's ligament. Separate it into loops. Between the loops there is an adipose tissue which forms the stroma. While in lactating or active one, there is a duct system and secretory alveoli. So, the alveoli of mammary gland. What is the difference between the alveoli presented in pregnancy and the alveoli presented in case of lactation? In lining of pregnancy is a protein synthesizing cell, while in lactation it varies from cubical to columnar according to the activity. The light microscope in pose are vacuolated due to dissolved fat, basophilic cytoplasm with basal oval nuclei surrounded by a myoepithelial cells. By electron microscope, pose are a protein secreting cells. The function of pregnancy mammary gland, it occurs in the late pregnancy, not in early pregnancy. In late pregnancy, they start secretion of watery fluid called colostrum, which rich in protein, antibodies, and antibodies, which is very important for the baby in early life after delivery. While the function of lactation, mammary gland in case of lactation is milk secretion, biologic, which rich in protein, lactose, and fat. What is the hormonal control of the alveoli? In case of pregnancy, hormonal control occurred by ovarian hormone, placental, pituitary, and suprarenal. Ovarian as estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen stimulates the duct growth, while progesterone stimulates alveoli growth. Placental hormones like progesterone and somatomamotropin. Pituitary as a prolactin and growth hormone. Suprarenal as a glucocorticoids. While hormonal control in case of lactation, after labor, a sudden drop of estrogen and progesterone occurs lead to stop the inhibition of prolactin, leads to increase in prolactin secretion that stimulates the alveoli to secrete the milk. Although after labor the oxytocin hormone lead to contraction of myoepithelial cell around the alveoli that lead to also secretion of the milk. The suckling effect of the baby will stimulate the tactile receptors that presented in the nipple, which lead to stimulation of the oxytocin secretion that lead to contraction of the myoepithelial cell around the alveoli, leading to secretion of milk, which is called milk ejection reflex. Finally, after cessation of the lactation, which is called weaning, the connective tissue and the fat again became abundant and the structure of the inactive gland is reassumed again. Okay, this is the duct system without alveoli in non-pregnant women and this is during pregnant woman. It's not well developed in late pregnancy, but in lactation it's well developed to produce milk in the lactating phase. This is the resting mammary gland, called consists from duct system only, and there is no acini, and this is the fat cell and presented in the stroma in between the lobules. This is the resting mammary gland, presented only a duct system lined by cubical to columnar cells only without any alveoli. Although this is a resting mammary gland, consists from ducts lined by cubical epithelium with no acini. While in the lactating mammary gland there is a ducts and acini filled with milk. So this is an acini filled with milk. This is an acini filled with milk. And that's it for today. And this is the end lecture of this module. And have a nice day, guys. And thank you for your listening. Bye bye.